Probably the last time men of the West mattered to them at all. Well, I mean, like, unironically, there is a very compelling narrative to be made here about the Chinese wanting revenge for the century of humiliation, right? Like, Americans haven't ever been colonized. Like, we colonized other people, but the United States hasn't been colonized. Whereas China was pretty much brought to its knees for 100 years. Uh, and then a lot of what happened afterwards was a direct consequence of forced westernization. I don't know. They might still be a bit bitter about it. I want to be a fly on the wall in a Chinese history class right now is what I'm saying. What are they teaching, like 8th graders or whatever? And we brought an end to the long century of humiliation with, you know, the Mao Zedong and the Cultural Revolution, or I don't know what the hell they're talking about over there. Now finally we can enact revenge. I don't know. Who does China have to thank for their dominance? Putin? Nah, man. Xi Jinping. Wait, so, well, I mean, if you want to go back, Mao Zedong, Deng, Xi Jinping. Like, they've had a pretty, like, good string of... Well, Mao wasn't good. They had a pretty good string of leaders if your goal is, like, amping that shit up nasty style. Basically. Mostly Deng. Well... let's give credit where credit is due to Xi Jinping. Dengism was what allowed the country to explode economically, but the reason China is what it is today is because Xi Jinping has been relatively adamant in using the power of the state to enforce constraints on the behavior of the corporations. Like, it goes beyond just, like, private market you know, investment, because if that's the case, like, every country on earth would be China. It wasn't just that. It was the economic miracle paired with that statist intervention, you know, or that state intervention, which has led to where we are right now, I guess. Led them to where they are. That was also Deng. It was the people after Deng who let it slack and let private companies get away with stuff. Well, to an extent, right? Because you had like those special market zones. They had like provinces with special laws when it came to free market enterprise and business, which I think Vietnam and Cuba do today, actually, if I'm remembering correctly as well. And then like the constraints have kind of like run off over time, but Xi Jinping has been pretty aggressive in holding frame. I don't know. I'm not a Chinese historian. All I know is that they want us all dead or something. That's all. That's I know what I need to know. Okay? He's mastered the art of just doing nothing. That's pretty true. I feel like the does nothing wins thing is partly American ignorance because they do things over there, but also just because China's so stable compared to us. Like every 4 years, like in America, we have like a permanent election cycle every single day, every year, 24-hour news cycle, battle this, fight left, right, Overton window, da-da-da. Whereas like they enjoy comparable political stability as a product of being a one-party authoritarian state. Yeah, I don't know. The EU also does 5-year plans. Well, the EU is also relatively stable, despite being comprised of nations that are individually not stable. But we'll see how things go over there. Will China ever get cool about LGBT people? My understanding is that in developed and relatively modern areas of China, the amount of interpersonal bigotry that you experience for being queer is comparable to what you would expect in large parts of America before, like, Obergsfell, right? Like, if you go out into the boonies in China, it can be pretty bad, same as in America. If you go into the more developed areas, you're probably not going to find pockets of queer friendliness that are comparable to what you'd get in, like, I don't know, the West Village in New York City or Capitol Hill in Seattle, like areas that are that open and, you know, they don't have gay marriage over there. But it's not like going to Iran or whatever. That's my understanding. It's a very big country. So there's a lot of exceptions and variants there, you know? I don't want to paint with a broad brush. Vaush, you are correct. The Grand Dragon of Cathay has given me his approval. You got to hit him with a China will grow larger. Man, we'll see. We'll see, man. I don't know. I do want to look at more coverage of the US-China trade war. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to like keep up with these numbers here, but my understand, so it is true that the Chinese economy relies heavily on exports to the US, but if I could read this paragraph from atlanticcouncil.org, China has been preparing for this conflict for a long time, including by diversifying its trade away from the West. Chinese exports to the U.S. account for 14.7% of China's total in 2024, down from 19.2% in 2018. In 7 years, they reduced their exports to the United States by a quarter. That's enormous. While overseas shipments to Southeast Asian and Belt and Road countries have grown, according to Beijing. Overall, about 30% of China's exports last year went to G7 countries, down from 48% in 2000. It is insane how poorly prepared we are for this. They've been fucking building out for this for a while. Meanwhile, we've just been sitting here. Is that a bad thing? It's very smart from their perspective. They've been diversifying. We haven't. They've been making allies. We've been alienating our allies. Yeah, we've just been jerking off. We've done nothing. How much of U.S.'s imports are from China? Chinese goods accounted for 13.3% of U.S. imports in 2024, down from a peak of 21.6% in 2017. Though that's a little bit misleading because Chinese-made component parts then go into stuff that's made in countries all around the world, which then get imported into America. Because China is the global manufacturing center, it's not just direct imports from China to America, it's Chinese industry fuels the entire world's productive economy, and that routes back into America. Not to be super conspiracy appeal, but isn't this strangely perfect for China in every way? I mean, it's not strangely perfect. They've been, like, it's just a good idea to diversify when you have a foreign enemy. Also, remember, the number comparison we just looked at began in 2018. 2018 is when Trump began the last trade war against China. So, literally, all of this is his fault. It's fucking Mike Ehrmantraut, Walter White shit. We had a good thing going, you stupid son of a bitch. We had China. All you had to do was sit there and pay them cents on the dollar for cheap, consistent manufacturing. But no, you, with your pride and your ego, you just had to blow it up. And that's why we are where we are today. Gray man theory is being vindicated. Fucking Donald Trump single-handedly is responsible for so much of the trajectory of the world. You know? Should a Dem president be hostile or friendly to China? Friendly. They should be listen, you should work with other countries basically no matter what, unless you absolutely can. I don't think we're going to get much done with countries like, I don't know, Russia, Turkmenistan, North Korea, Eritrea. Like, sure. Like, there are countries that are just off on their own, okay? But the senseless antagonism towards China over the past 30 years has been nothing but post-Cold War fear-mongering from U.S. oligarchs who are terrified at the idea of a Chinese capital competing with them. That's it. The whole narrative of, like, China rising, China hasn't been threatening us. Oh, this extremely, like, militantly, we were allied with China for what? Since Nixon, we had relatively good relations with China because we wedged them against the Soviets. But the Soviet Union collapsed. Now they're just Russia. We raped Russia and the former Soviet countries with shock therapy. And then China, like, boomed under Deng. And now the fucking American oligarchs are like, oh, shit, you can do capitalism centered from countries outside of, or from cities outside of New York or London? You can have, like, gigantic burgeoning financial markets that we don't already control? Well, that's unacceptable. Clearly, they're like the enemy of the West or something. I don't know. Not to argue that China hasn't done evil things, but, like, we have definitely been the aggressor here when it comes to the international relationship.